Hello and welcome. We are starting with chapter number 5, Pudd'nhead Wilson. This is for the first year BA LLB students from Mumbai University, semester 1. I'm making this video from the exam perspective, focusing only on the core summary and critical analysis of the novel, of particularly these chapters that we have for our syllabus. So for Pudd'nhead Wilson, we have chapter 22 and 20 and 21, and we'll be covering that. In chapter 20, the trial of the twins accused of murder begins, and it becomes the focal point of the community. Pudd'nhead Wilson, their defense attorney, he is their defense attorney of the twins, faces a difficult challenge, having found no trace of the missing accomplice, whom he believes is key to solving the case. The court is filled with onlookers, including the victim's sister, Mrs. Pratt, and other witnesses like Roxy and Chambers. The prosecutor, Pembroke Howard, presents a compelling circumstantial case, claiming that the twins committed the murder out of revenge and self-preservation, painting the crime as cowardly and heinous. Mrs. Pratt testifies, claiming to have found the accused standing over the body, though the twins deny any involvement, stating that they were merely responding to a cry for help. Wilson attempts to shift the focus of the case, introducing the possibility of an unidentified accomplice who might have been involved in the murder. His argument is weak, and the trial seems to be leaning in favor of the prosecution. As the court adjourns for the day, Tom Driscoll, one of the key suspects in the murder, feels secure. He reflects on how carefully he has one of the key suspects means key suspects of the murder because he was the murderer. He reflects on how carefully he has covered his tracks, believing that Wilson will never uncover the true perpetrator. Tom mocks Wilson's efforts to find a mysterious woman who might be connected to the crime, knowing that she doesn't exist. You will have to read the entire chapter to understand these summary. Later, Wilson pores over fingerprints in his collection, trying to find clues that might solve the mystery. When Tom visits him and handles one of the glass strips, Wilson is struck with a sudden revelation. As he examines Roxy's fingerprints from when she was nursing Tom, he begins to connect the dots. Tom had left new fingerprints on the glass which align with previous prints found on the murder weapon. Wilson realizes a shocking truth. Tom is the murderer. As the weight of this revelation sinks in, he mutters, "I can't believe it. It's so." His discovery is profound, but he struggles to fully comprehend the mystery of how Tom had eluded suspicion for 23 years. The chapter ends with Wilson poised at the edge of a breakthrough, his disbelief and frustration building as he faces a moral and legal dilemma, knowing the truth but unsure of what to do next. In chapter 21, Doom of Pudd'nhead Wilson, the storyline reaches a pivotal moment in the trial of Luigi and Angelo, the twins, accused of the murder of Judge Driscoll. The chapter focuses on Pudd'nhead Wilson's unexpected and groundbreaking courtroom strategy to prove twins' innocence and reveal the true murderer. Wilson, who had been previously ridiculed for his eccentricity, makes an astonishing revelation about fingerprints as a method of identifying individuals, which he has been studying in his spare time for years now. Wilson begins by publicly admitting a claim made by the prosecution that the person whose fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, a knife, must be the murderer. Murderer. However, sorry for the tongue twisters. However, he then shifts the narrative by introducing his own evidence. He explains that every person's fingerprints are unique and unchangeable, making them a perfect tool for identifying the culprit. Wilson reveals that he has been meticulously collecting these physiological autographs for years, and he has a detailed record of fingerprints from nearly every person in the town, including the judge, the jury, and the sheriff. With the court's attention piqued, Wilson proceeds Wilson proceeds to perform a series of fingerprint tests in front of the stunned audience. He compares the fingerprints of the accused with those found on the knife, revealing that they do not match. This bold assertion creates a stir, but Wilson presses on. He then presents a pantograph, enlargements of the fingerprints of the twin brothers, and compares them with those of the other people, including the jurors, with remarkable success. Wilson's detailed knowledge of the fingerprints is undeniable and leads the audience to believe in the veracity of his claim. The revelation, the revelations escalates when Wilson introduces the fingerprints of two infants, A and B, taken at different ages. He suggests that these children were switched in infancy and that the white Tom Driscoll, who has been posing as a free man, is actually the child born into slavery, the true identity of B. Wilson's meticulous examination reveals that the real murderer is Tom, who had murdered Judge Driscoll. His fingerprints on the knife and his resemblance to the marks of a slave child identify him as a criminal. As Wilson reveals the horrifying truth, Tom Driscoll's guilt is undeniable, and he collapses in the courtroom. The chapter culminates with Roxy's shock and despair as the truth about her son is revealed. She had knowingly switched the infants in their cradles, setting the stage for Tom's tragic deception. In a stunning courtroom drama, Wilson's methodical approach and scientific expertise trump as he proves the innocence of the accused twins and exposes the true murderer. The chapter concludes with a dramatic confession from Tom as the court and the spectators are left in stern silence at the revelation of his identity and crime. Let us look at the character sketch of Pudd'nhead Wilson, whose real name was David Wilson. Character sketch. Pudd'nhead Wilson is a lawyer in the town whose intellect and unconventional methods initially render him an object of ridicule. He is eccentric, meticulous, and highly observant. Though his appearance and quirky personality make him seem inept, Wilson proves himself to be far more capable and shrewd than anyone gives him credit for. His obsession with collecting fingerprints leads to the eventual solving of the crime, as his understanding of fingerprints is key in revealing the truth. Throughout the narrative, he is portrayed as patient, methodical, and precise. Wilson's breakthrough in the courtroom comes when he presents the idea that everyone carries a unique natal autograph in the form of fingerprints, a concept that shooks the courtroom but ultimately brings justice. His self-assurance and confidence grow as the trial progresses, culminating in the revelation of Tom's true identity. Let's look at his critical evaluation. Wilson represents intellectual prowess that is often overlooked due to superficial judgments about his eccentricity. His character challenges the conventional views of intelligence and success, showing that quiet persistence and keen observation can lead to profound insights. While his methods seem unorthodox, they are highly effective in solving the mystery. His approach reflects a strong belief in the power of evidence and rational thought, which allows him to break through the societal biases and prejudices surrounding him. His success in the courtroom is vindication of his character, and it emphasizes the novel's critique of society's tendency to value appearances over substance. Wilson's trump is bittersweet, however, as it exposes the harsh reality of Tom's identity and the consequences of a life built on deceit. Next, let's look at Tom Driscoll. Thomas A. Becket Driscoll. Character sketch. Tom is introduced as a charming and spoiled young man, raised as the son of a wealthy judge, but actually the biological child of a slave woman, Roxy. His character is a study in moral corruption, as he is initially oblivious to the deeper ramification of his actions. Tom's arrogance, greed, and entitlement becomes evident throughout the novel, especially in his reaction during the trial. His behavior shifts from smug confidence to utter desperation as the truth about his identity begins to unravel. As the trial reaches its climax, Tom's past actions and his true nature as a murderer are revealed. His fingerprints on the murder weapon are the key to exposing him, as Wilson's method of fingerprint identification uncovers his guilt. Tom's final breakdown in the courtroom, where he collapses in fear and guilt, marks the tragic end of his life of privilege built on deception. Critical evaluation. Tom serves as a symbol of hypocrisy and moral failings of society, particularly regarding race and class. His life is marked by privilege, but his deceitful actions reveal the emptiness of that privilege. Tom's willingness to exploit his mistaken racial identity for personal gain shows the corrupting influence of power and wealth. His downfall is tragic but inevitable, and his false sense of superiority and his criminality are ultimately exposed. Tom's fate underscores the central theme of the novel, the idea that identity is not solely determined by one's race or social standing, but is also a product of moral choices and actions. His failure to see his own flaws and his deepening guilt as the trial progresses paint him as a tragic failure, as a tragic figure, unable to escape the consequences of his own wrongdoing. Roxy, Roxana, character sketch. Roxy is the mother of Tom, who was raised in ignorance of her true identity as a slave. That is, Tom was raised as the master's son, Judge Driscoll's son. Her character is complex. While she is a loving mother, she is also complicit in the deception of exchanging her son with the white infant, resulting in Tom's mistaken identity. Roxy is portrayed as a woman of strong emotions, deeply protective of her child. Her deep guilt and fear about the revelation of the truth make her a tragic character caught between the love for her son and the consequences of her actions. When Wilson reveals the truth of the switch in the courtroom, Roxy is both horrified and relieved. Her guilt is palpable as she kneels, expressing her remorse and calling on divine mercy for her past mistakes. Yet she remains a central figure in the drama, symbolizing the racial and social tensions of the time. Critical evaluation. Roxy represents the complexity of identity and the lengths to which people will go to secure a better life for themselves or their loved ones. Her decision to switch the babies was motivated by a desire to ensure a better life for her child, but it ultimately has catastrophic consequences. Roxy's role in the story highlights the themes of racial identity, class, and the burdens of slavery. Her actions are both a desperate attempt to escape the constraints of slavery and an unfortunate reinforcement of the racial prejudices that define her society. Roxy's final breakdown in the courtroom, upon realizing the full scope of her actions, adds a layer of emotional depth to her character. While she has done wrong, her guilt is rooted in the difficult circumstances she faces as a woman of color in a racially oppressive society. Her character forces the reader to grapple with the moral ambiguities inherent in her actions and to understand the complex factors that drive people to make morally questionable decisions. Next, let's evaluate the entire novel, specifically chapter 20 and 21. Pudd'nhead Wilson. Twain uses this chapter to highlight Wilson's intelligence, perseverance, and moral integrity. Despite the mockery he faces, Wilson's scientific approach proves to be the decisive factor in exposing the truth. This illustrates Twain's commentary on the value of intellectual pursuits and the often underestimated power of knowledge. Wilson's focus on fingerprinting, in particular, symbolizes a search for truth and identity, a major theme in the novel. Wilson's trump in revealing the truth is also a moral victory. While his scientific analysis of fingerprints serves as the key to solving the crime, Twain also uses this moment to explore the theme of moral justice. Wilson's methods, although unconventional, are rooted in fairness and truth. Twain suggests that genuine justice requires looking beyond social norms and appearances and considering deeper, more objective forms of knowledge. Tom Driscoll. What I'm doing here is going through the text of the novel. This is in a story format, so it's very easy for me to remember. I don't need to remember word by word. We can expand in our own words in the exams. So if they tell us to write something about Tom Driscoll, the character of Tom Driscoll, we should be able to write and expand on it. When we know about the entire, let's look at Tom Driscoll. Tom, on the other hand, continues to embody the theme of social and moral corruption. Throughout the trial, he exudes, he exudes a sense of arrogance and entitlement, largely due to his mistaken belief that his white identity has provided him with immunity from the consequences of his actions. Tom's casual dismissal of the situation reflects his deep internalized racism and the privilege he enjoys as a result of his assumed social status. The fact that he continues to evade suspicion until the fingerprints are presented speaks volumes about the blind spots in the justice system, where identity, especially racial identity, can obscure the truth. The revelation of his true identity brings a complex mix of sympathy and condemnation. While he is revealed to be a murderer, his actions are shown to be deeply rooted in his confusion and self delusion regarding his race and class. Tom's belief in his white identity and his subsequent panic upon its exposure reveals the damaging effects of a society that categorizes people based on race and social standing. His collapse at the end of the chapter is not just physical, but represents the collapse of his entire constructed identity. The courtroom and the society. Twain's portrayal of the courtroom is critical of the societal biases that perpetuate injustice. The mockery directed at Wilson and the way court dismisses his findings at first reflect a deep-seated distrust of unconventional methods. The social structure where appearances and established norms are upheld over actual competence of truth is satirized in this chapter. Wilson's success in exposing the truth is a trump over this system. Roxana, Roxy. Roxana's reaction to the exposure of her son's true nature is one of mixed emotions. She is initially devastated but ultimately relieved. Her pain comes from the realization that her son, whom she had tried to protect, has been complicit in her crime, but her sense of guilt is tempered by the realization that she too has been a victim of the racial system. Roxana's character symbolizes the tragic consequences of slavery and racial oppression, as she is a mother torn between the love for her son and the painful realization that he has been living a lie. Let's look at the thematic analysis. Thematic analysis. Identity and racial constructs. A key theme in these chapters is the construction of identity, both personal and social. Tom's collapse underscores the fragility of the racial identity that society imposes upon him. The moment of revelation in the courtroom, where the true identities of the twins are exposed, serves as a critique of the arbitrary nature of race and class distinctions in society. Twain uses Tom's mistaken belief in his white identity to show the ways in which societal systems are built upon superficial distinctions that ultimately fail to reflect any inherent truth, justice, and moral integrity. Pudd'nhead Wilson's method of using fingerprint analysis to reveal the truth stands in stark contrast to the societal prejudices of the time. Twain critiques a justice system that is more concerned with upholding appearances and social order than with uncovering the truth. Wilson's approach to justice is based on an unwavering commitment to evidence and fairness, illustrating Twain's belief that true justice must transcend the biases of race and class. The role of knowledge and reason. Throughout these chapters, Twain emphasizes the value of knowledge, reason, and intellectual curiosity. Wilson's dedication to his scientific methods allows him to uncover the truth in a world that is otherwise driven by superstition, social hierarchies, and prejudices. His intellectual pursuits are framed as both a personal virtue and a societal necessity. Let's move on to who said to whom and the context. The murderer had left the strangest and most interesting evidence behind him. Narrator to the readers. This refers to the fingerprints that Tom unknowingly left behind, which will later be used by Pudd'nhead Wilson to solve the case. Next, we will proceed to examine the finger marks. Pudd'nhead Wilson to the courtroom. This marks the climax of Wilson's efforts, where he finally presents his evidence, demonstrating his fingerprinting technique. Next quote. These marks were made by the same hand that committed the murder. Pudd'nhead Wilson to the courtroom to the court. This is the moment Wilson directly implicates Tom Driscoll in the murder using arsenic evidence. Fifth, he has been a usurper from the cradle. Pudd'nhead Wilson to the court. Wilson reveals that Tom Driscoll was actually the slave Chambers and had been living a false life due to the baby swap. Sixth, my God, I am a whatever, nigga, whatever it said. Tom Driscoll to himself, spoken aloud. Tom's horrified realization after Wilson reveals his true identity, showcasing his deeply ingrained racism and fear of losing his status. 7. It is the irony of fate that the poor fellow should be condemned for a crime which he did not commit. Narrator to the reader. This reflects on how Tom had previously enjoyed privilege as a white man, but is now condemned under the racial prejudices of the time. I aren't going to cry. It's too thankful. I is too thankful. That is, I am too thankful. Roxy to herself. Roxana is relieved that justice has been served despite her motherly instincts, as Tom is finally revealed for his crimes. Next, they let me go free, but they give me the name and the place that I was born to, said by Chambers, who is the real Tom Driscoll, to the court and the society. The real Tom, who was raised as a slave, is now legally restored to his rightful place, but is still emotionally displaced. Next, a man's own hand is his deadliest enemy. Pudd'nhead Wilson to the court. Wilson comments on how fingerprints serve as undeniable proof, symbolizing how a person's past actions ultimately reveal the truth. Quote number 12. That was my child. That was my child. Basically, it's children. That was my child. He wouldn't have come to no harm but for me. It's said by Roxy to herself. Roxy laments her role in swapping the babies, feeling responsible for Tom's moral downfall. 13. It was a fatal mistake to swap those children. Roxy to herself. Roxana realizes that her attempt to secure a better future for her son actually led to his moral corruption and eventual ruin. Next, the fingerprint never lies. Pudd'nhead Wilson to the jury and the courtroom. Wilson reaffirms the reliability of science over racial and social prejudices, marking a trump of truth. Next, his heart was blacker than his skin. Narrator to the readers. This comment on Tom underscores Twain's criticism of racism and morality, emphasizing that evil is not dictated by race but by one's actions. Next, for all these years, he had been white. Now he was suddenly a Negro, said by narrator to the readers. Twain highlights the absurdity of racial classification, showing how one's social identity is arbitrarily assigned rather than inherent. Next, the tragedy was he was ruined by the very advantages that were meant to save him. Narrator to the reader. Tom's downfall is ironic. His privileged upbringing made him corrupt and ultimately led to his destruction. Next, there is no escaping the handwriting of the Almighty. Pudd'nhead Wilson to the court. Wilson equates fingerprint evidence to divine justice, reinforcing the inevitability of truth prevailing. Next, the real heir had the real heir had lived a slave's life, and the sham one a white man's. Narrator to the reader. This sums up the novel's central irony, critic, critiquing critiquing the arbitrary assignment of race and privilege in society. This completes the chapter Pudd'nhead Wilson. Do consider subscribing and sharing the video link with your friends. Thank you very much for your time. Take care and bye bye.